So we saw some deviations in the crypto markets today, guys, based off of the PPI inflation data that came out. We talked about some key events that were going to be happening this week, and that's why I keep you guys updated on the day-to-day events. Right now, we're seeing deviations for the altcoin market, for Ethereum, for Bitcoin, and right now, everyone's wondering what's going to be happening next. All eyes are on rate cuts happening in September, but now everyone's wondering exactly how many rate cuts are going to be happening, and there is a great thread from the Kobesi letter talking about exactly this data that came out and what is going to be anticipating moving into the next few months. So with all that being said, if you guys are new to my channel, check out the rest of my content and keep you guys updated on the day-to-day events, price action on Bitcoin, Ethereum, altcoins, how liquidity is shifting, and practically everything you need to be aware of. Guys, on Sunday, I dropped a video talking about exactly the key events that were going to be happening. On Monday, I went back over those events, and now throughout the week, we're seeing them have an effect on the market, and everyone's wondering what is going on. But if you are keeping up with the day-to-day, you are aware of what's going on, and you are anticipating potential deviations. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump straight into the market, straight into the charts, and what you need to be aware of. So like how I said, crypto markets saw deviations across the market, and as a result, guys, everyone is running around like a chicken without a head. And this is where we start to look at the price action around Bitcoin, around Ethereum, and the specific zones that we have been testing, especially with the performance on the monthly time frame. That really goes to show exactly how deviations could be potentially taking place. We talked about this in multiple other videos, guys. Altcoins, as a result, are pretty much having an effect based off of the deviations that they're seeing with Ethereum, and Bitcoin dominance. While it's still on a downward trend, we're starting to see that altcoins aren't really responding as effectively as we want to see. Ethereum is still holding quite strong, but right now, guys, alts are kind of feeling a little bit of the pain. Right now, we saw the US markets, deviate like crazy after all of the data that started coming out today. The Kobesi letter let us know exactly that, there was some important data that was going to be coming out, and I talked about this, guys, on Monday and Tuesday, on Sunday, multiple days. But right now, we had some important PPI inflation data that came out. Also, some information came out on Tuesday as well, and based off of that data, everyone was anticipating what was going to be happening today. Whenever that data came out, everything started dumping. Bitcoin started dumping, Ethereum started dumping, the US market started dumping, and it's just because of the lack of certainty and exactly what's going to be happening in the US markets. We're still anticipating some more information coming out on Friday, so just be ready for that and exactly how the markets are going to be closing out for the week. Now, the Kobesi letter talks about a great thread talking about exactly the inflation CPI data that came out, and pretty much what is going on, as well as the PPI inflation data, and pretty much how it's at its hottest since March of 2022. So he says, this is unprecedented. Core CPI inflation is above 3%, and PPI inflation is at its hottest since March 2022. Meanwhile, President Trump is calling for a 300 basis point rate cut and is set to replace the Fed chair, Jerome Powell. Are you ready for what's next? And he goes into a thread. And this is a really great perspective, guys, talking about exactly what's anticipated from the US Fed and exactly rate cuts that could be potentially happening, and how right now there's a shift in perspective. So the week's inflation data was not ideal. Core CPI inflation is now up to 3.1%, and both headline and core PPI inflation are above 3%. As seen in the below chart per zero hedge, PPI inflation is clearly re-accelerating, but here is where it gets even more interesting. The question has now shifted from if the Fed will cut rates to now how many rate cuts will we get? As shown below, there is now a 94% chance of a rate cut in September 2025, with markets pricing in a base case of 3 cuts in 2025, guys. And this is what we were talking about in previous videos, how we were anticipating, multiple rate cuts from the end of July moving into the beginning of January. So this is where a lot of people are anticipating now, how many rate cuts are we going to see, and what is the Fed chair going to be doing? Now, this comes as inflation is rebounding. Jumping more into it, Trump says that's nothing compared to exactly what he's anticipating. He says President Trump is now calling for a 300 basis point interest rate cut immediately. This would be 3 times larger than the 100 BPS cut on March 15, 2020, the largest in history. Fed Chair Powell is refusing to do so for now. Jumping more into it, however, President Trump has said that he is narrowing down his list for the next Fed chair, which we've been talking about on this channel. Fed Chair Powell's term will end in May of 2026, which is why they're saying this is premature. And the new Fed chair announcement is coming soon. Markets will be trading off what the new Fed chair guides over Fed Chair Powell, because once they move into the spot, more than likely they're going to be doing what Trump says. But this is where more, anticipation comes into play. This is clearing a path for Trump to get rate cuts even as inflation re-accelerates. He wants rates down to 1%, guys. If this happens, mortgage rates will fall toward 3%, which are currently, sitting upwards at around like 7% and up. And already record high housing prices will explode. In our view, home prices would surge by 10% in year one. That is freaking crazy, guys. And honestly, I don't think that's going to play out the way everyone's anticipating. The near-term effects on equities would be explosive. 300 basis points of rate cuts would send the S&P 500 well above 7,000, but it would come at a substantial cost, as we would expect CPI inflation to exceed 5% within a year of such drastic rate cuts. So while the rate cuts are going to be good in the short term and everything's going to start rallying, this is not going to be looking good, guys, comparing it to the 2008 financial crisis and the 2020 COVID pandemic, whenever we saw these crazy rate cuts. Now, and here's when it gets even bigger and into a bigger problem. Services inflation surged by 1.1%, led to 3.8% in margins from machinery, equipment, wholesaling. Fresh and dry vegetables also surged by 38.9%, leading goods inflation. Why is it so bad? It's the first sign of tariff-induced inflation. So this is going back into the Trump tariffs and how it's having an effect in the trickle-down period. Now, Trump's argument is that cutting rates would reduce U.S. interest. If the rate on all $29 trillion in public debt was cut by 300 BPS, the U.S. could save $290 billion times 3, so $807 billion a year. But refinancing all of this debt as soon as possible would be impossible. 20% could be refinanced in year one to save $174 billion. Now, getting out of all these numbers, so now Trump wants immediate rate cuts to lower interest rate expenses on U.S. debt, but tariffs are adding to inflation, and the Fed will be cutting into hot inflation data. With the trade war clearly here to stay, 300 BPS of rate cuts would create an unprecedented situation, practically, guys, making too fast of a move too quickly, and as a result, seeing a bad reaction from multiple different spots in the economy. So this is getting really crazy. When I was reading this, it honestly was sending chills down my spine. Yesterday's news won't make it any easier. The U.S. Treasury posted a $291 billion budget deficit in July, the second largest deficit for any July on record. U.S. interest expense is set to exceed $3 billion per day. Without rate cuts, interest will skyrocket, adding more pressure. So this is pretty much squeezing the Fed to pretty much make those rate cuts. And if we see that, this is where it's going to start to get really nasty, really crazy. As rate cuts near, we expect to see explosive moves across various markets, guys. And this goes into, his perspective. He says Trump's new Fed chair will clearly be cutting rates. However, the question becomes, will this new Fed chair maintain rate cuts if inflation continues to rise? And if so, we are about to witness history. That just sends chills down my spine, guys, because if you understand anything about the economy, rate cuts, inflation, the data that's been coming out, this is not looking, of course it's going to look good in the short term. Everything is going to explode. The S&P is going to explode. Multiple markets are going to explode. But the aftermath of everything, especially how inflation is moving right now, it is not going to look good. We're going to see the bear markets of bear markets, and it's going to get nasty. And this is one of the main reasons why we saw a deviation today, guys. And that's why keeping up with the news events is super important. Not only the price action, but what has an effect on the markets, guys. Crypto Intelligence X gives a great perspective around liquidity with, all the news events that are going on. Different assets explode at different times. Yesterday we saw Condex explode really crazy. It's still sitting quite nice, and I talked about it in yesterday's video, which you should really go check it out, guys. But overall, he says liquidity never stands still. It rotates. People get bored when their investment stalls. They sell the winner to chase what's lagging. It happens over and over. Markets are just one big rotation of money stretching searching for returns. GG to the ones who paid attention. And this goes to show, guys, that liquidity moves out of big assets into smaller assets because people get bored when their investment starts to stall out. So then they look into the next best investment. And that's why I pretty much dropped yesterday's video talking about exactly conducts and small altcoins and how you can make some crazy gains by rotating. Now, Crypto Mitch now gives his perspective around the markets and pretty much the PPI inflation data and what he, thinks of it all. He says there's always whatever news causing the markets to drop. The whatever news is PPI, CPI. It's just liquidations after liquidations on long positions on altcoins. That's why the correction is vital and steep. Let it go down if it overstretches, buy the dip. Right now, guys, people are over leveraged on longs because of the green that we were seeing in the market. And this data came out and it just created the perfect scenario for everything to dump. And since everyone was long, there was enough liquidity to just keep dumping the markets. And that's what we saw today, guys, which is why whatever news is really important to keep up with, regardless of what news is coming out. That's why I really am keen on keeping up with not only the day-to-day events and sentiment, but also the news events that are having an effect in the global economic events. Now, crypto markets have been seeing deviations across the market. We've been seeing it all day, guys. You've been seeing it. You've been feeling the pain. If you long the market, you got shreked, which is not good for you. But overall, guys, right now, we're seeing red across the market. My portfolio, a few of my assets have been exploding quite significantly. Mainly, guys, like how I said, those low-cap AI gems, gaming, RWA, a little bit of memes as well. And this is where you can start to actually make some decent gains by focusing on the right investments. But if you're not keeping up with all these news events and everything that's going on, you pretty much don't know what is going to happen. And then whenever something like this happens, when everything dumps, you feel like everything is over. And it's not, guys. So swiping everything to the side, guys, right now, that is currently what is taking place in the crypto markets. Everyone is going crazy. We saw massive deviations because everyone was longing everything practically. And whenever we see key events happening in the week, I drop videos to let you guys know about this stuff. I did not buy any altcoins. I was anticipating deviations with everything that was taking place. So this is where, you have to anticipate what is going to be happening next, and keeping up with the day-to-day news events, the sentiment, price action is what's going to separate you from everybody, guys. And on this channel, that is what we do. So if you're new to my channel, check out the rest of my content and keep you guys updated on the day-to-day events, price action around Bitcoin, Ethereum, altcoins, how liquidity is shifting, and practically everything you need to be aware of. And I break down in my videos, guys, why the markets are reacting the way that they are. And I don't try to fill your brain with any more fluff or any more bullcrap that's going on. People are telling you to buy specific altcoins. I'm even telling you to focus on other altcoins because right now is the time to be doing it. Whenever we see deviations, you have to take advantage of it. Liquidity does not stand still. It is consistently moving. So I'm going to keep dropping day-to-day videos, guys, keeping you guys updated on the day-to-day events and also a few altcoins that I'm looking at. I want to drop a video that's similar to Alex Becker and a few of these other ones that are talking about the best altcoins to be buying and more information. So if you guys are interested, drop me a comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think of my content. Let me know what you think of my perspective. Let me know what you think of the dump that happened today. Do you think altcoin season is already about to start? Do you think we're going to be seeing more deviations? I'd love to hear everyone's perspective. But I drop day-to-day content every day, so stay tuned. Share the channel with somebody else that wants to learn what's going on in the crypto markets, not just, the altcoins that big influencers and coals are telling you to buy. Learn something, guys. Stick with it and progress. All right, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay tuned. Peace.